Yeah. Can folks who are on the Zoom just let us know if they can hear us okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Then I will.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Echo a little bit, so turn their volume down.
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So then you should be able to stand. Can you see the camera? Yeah.
Okay.
We gotta move it up a bit.
Here we are.
Is that good?
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
That's okay. Okay. I want to welcome everyone tonight to our presentation. My name is Bill Tyler. I'm the fire chief here in Novato, and I want to thank all of you for coming out and spending some of your evening with us to learn about how we intend to become a more fire adaptive community. And that fire adaptive community is one in which you've got community members that come together and that are informed and that can plan and work and take actions towards having a more fire safe community. And so a couple of things before we get started, and that is the realization that fires are bigger, they're more destructive, they're killing more people than ever before. And so it's incumbent on fire agencies to work with their communities to become fire adaptive. The projects that we're going to talk about tonight with the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break is just one component of a much larger plan to become fire adaptive. And I just want you to imagine for a second, if you have a bullseye in your mind's eye, maybe throw darts at, but you've got a center of that bullseye is really your own home. It's where you live, it's where you stand, it's what you have control over making changes to. And there's a lot that needs to happen within that center bullseye. It may be things like hardening your home, taking combustible construction and converting that to ignition resistant construction, and then moving out. And so that might be your roof, your decks, your eaves, your vents, and other architectural features that are readily ignitable. So we want to make that more ignition resistant. And then moving out from there, you've got your landscape. You've got a defensible space area. So 0 to 5 feet, in which we really would like to see a non-combustible zone, and then moving out up to 100 feet, where you're removing fire-prone vegetation, you're changing the arrangements of the plants so that if a fire does come, brands and embers catch anything on your yard on fire, it doesn't carry to the structure and then ignite the structure. That's the part that you really have control over. And then the next concentric ring outside of that is your neighbors. So what your neighbors are doing matters. How they treat their landscape, what they do with their homes will have an impact on your house. And as you add those neighbors up, pretty soon you come up with a street, or you've got a neighborhood. And that neighborhood can become focused on becoming firewise. And I know we've got a lot of firewise members and citizens in the audience tonight, and I appreciate you being here. And what that means is they get together and they decide they need to better understand what their risks and what the hazards are in the community that they live, and that they're going to put a plan together and take steps, concrete steps, to meet regularly, inform each other, and work together to try and do projects to reduce those hazards. And then moving out from that neighborhood, in some cases, you end up in open space areas, either private or publicly owned. And that next ring is really what we're going to be talking about tonight. The concept of creating a shaded fuel break, where we can try and change what that landscape does and the fire and the way it behaves within that space. And what is a shaded fuel break really? It's removing dead and down vegetation from 100 feet that back up to people's homes in their neighborhoods. So dead and down comes up, we're limbing up trees, and we're removing the ground fuels, we're cutting the dry grasses. And basically what you want to do then is if a fire comes, you want it to stay on the ground. You don't want it to ladder up into the canopy and then to come against the house that way. So by creating this extra area where you can modify the vegetation, you're actually giving firefighters a greater opportunity to get in between that fire. They can fight a fire in a shaded fuel break, and they can do a front attack on that. Whereas if it's completely overgrown with a lot of jackpot fuels, they can't. They won't be able to put themselves in between the homes and the open spaces. So we're creating areas for firefighters to work. We're reducing the fire behavior. We're opening up the canopy. And it turns out that it's also great for the environment, because if you've got a very overgrown landscape, you're not getting the animals moving through those spaces as well. And it just becomes much more park-like. So there's also an aesthetic appeal to that. And at the end of the day, all of these efforts are also intended to try and make sure that you can have great fire insurance at reasonable rates, and that you're not going to be turned down or have your insurance triple. So all of these efforts will go towards that. We also understand in fire adaptive communities that firefighters can't save every single home. And some of these incredibly large conflagrations, are something that is very, very, very difficult to stop. But the type of fire that we have in Novato really isn't generally the conflagration, although we have had that. We have a history in the 1920s of a fire that burned from 37 and 101 all the way to the sea, over 40,000 acres at that time. So we've had those types of fires. But the Novato fire is really a 20 or 30-minute fire that either impacts 1 to 3 homes. And this type of work with the shaded fuel break, the type of work where you're changing your defensible space and hardening your home will go a long way towards protecting the community. So again, I want to thank you for being here tonight. Hopefully we'll be able to answer all of your questions around this. We'll stick around. Myself and my staff are here to help you. And we've got cards that can pass out afterwards. If you have any unanswered questions, we want to answer those for you. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mark Brown. Mark Brown is the retired Deputy Chief for Marin County Fire and also the Executive Director for the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. Mark.
Thanks, Bill. Good evening, everybody. So happy to be here, and I'm going to try to get the slideshow to advance after I get that going. There we go. So first of all, thank you, Chief Tyler. And I'm not just saying this because Chief Tyler's in the room. You guys are very lucky to have a fire chief like Chief Tyler and a fire department like Novato Fire District. We do want to have just a quick round of introductions and talk about the purpose of, I'm not as tall as Chief Tyler, so we had to change the camera. Thank you for making that. Just a quick round of introductions. Like Bill said, I'm Mark Brown with Marin County or Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. 30 years of staying in Marin County Fire Department. It takes a while to get that out of your memory. We have Emily and Caitlin from Panorama, who is our environmental consultant that helps us scope this project and make sure that we're doing it in an ecologically way. We have John Dickashay and Lynn Osgood in the back from Novato Fire, one of our great partners with Mike Swayze, who was one of the point people in designing this with. The brains of the MWPA, and that's Ann Krelock, our planning and program manager in the back. I get to say that because she's not talking tonight, so she doesn't get to counter that. So we have a great team working on this. So we're going to give you an overview of the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break. We'll talk about phase 1 implementation. We're going to talk about the mitigation, compliance, and reporting, and then we'll get into a Q&A with you. This is actually our second meeting that we've had for this. We had a community meeting that was all remote to talk about how we were going to design this, what process we were going to take to get the project designed. And then our second meeting is this meeting here, so we can actually talk about the implementation. And I like to look at this project and other projects similar to it, the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. To me, this is why the MWPA was built. And that was to look at large scale projects and be able to effectively implement them in an efficient and rapid fashion, but still be environmentally sensitive. The Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, from the time that we said, this is what we want to do, to being able to get the project approved was 10 months. And that's moving a project through 11 different jurisdictions of Marin County. 38-mile project, 11 jurisdictions, and from planning to implementation was 10 months. And we've gone through 1 year of work, and we're actually on pace to finish what we estimated for 1 year. So now we went to the even greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break, 60 miles of implementation, up to 300 feet wide. And we were able, since we learned from the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, we were able to get the scoping and compliance done in about 8 months. And now we're going to be able to get our feet on the ground, start getting work, and stay on pace that we're creating. Chief Tyler hit it really well about the fire history of Marin County. Fortunately, over the last few decades, we have been spared from some of the most devastating fires. The best way, in my opinion, to predict wildfire future is to look at the past. And if you look at the past of Marin, significant fire history. And I like using the Tubbs fire. We all know the Tubbs fire burned in 2017. When did it burn before? And what was its name? The 1964 Hanley fire, right? Did you know September 17th, 1923, that fire burned? That's the first recorded history of that fire. You know what else happened on September 17th, 1923? The first Oakland Hills fire. And the fire that Chief Tyler talked about, the fire that burned from Ignacio to Bolinas. So if fires can burn like that in 1923 and repeat themselves every 40 to 50 years, you can honestly say we've dodged a bullet in Marin by not having a repeat of those fires. And Chief Weber put it so well when right after the 2017 fires, the thing that separated Marin County from Sonoma County, we didn't have the ignitions. Sonoma County had the ignitions. They also had Napa to their north that sent a bunch of fire into Sonoma County. So we love to learn from other people's events. And so rather than, my baseball coach taught me that. The smart person learns from their mistakes. The smarter person learns from other people's. And I'm not saying there were mistakes made, but there were lessons learned from Sonoma County. So we invited land managers, law enforcement, and fire agencies down to Marin. We asked them what they were doing before, during, and after the fires. We asked them what their successes were and what their challenges were. We came up with 6.5 pages of action items and realized that there was not a single agency that was charged to do those action items. They crossed different jurisdictions and they crossed different disciplines of public governance. And there was nobody funded to do that. And so the idea of creating a joint powers authority that spanned all these jurisdictions came about. And then we needed funding. And that's when we went to the voters with Measure C, and we were able to get our joint powers authority approved. So I won't read the mission to you guys. You're all able to read a mission statement, but I do want to focus on the boxes down there. The MWPA really sees itself as being a convener and bringing different groups together for a common cause. One of our partners is our land management agencies. We have Jim Chaka from Marin County Parks in the back. We all know that if we're going to be successful in a wildfire environment, it includes managing our lands, the open space lands, and our private lands appropriately. So we have a great relationship with all of our land management agencies at this time. One of our most important partners are you guys, the residents of Marin. It's important that we all understand, in order to be successful in today's wildfire environment, that we all work together. It is the fire agencies, law, all good government, our residents, our private businesses. And we need our residents to be an active part of the solution. And so we thank you for being here, for being an active part of that. Civic leaders, whether it's elected civic leaders, appointed civic leaders, but to me, almost as important, if not more important, are the leaders at large within our communities, whether you're a FireWise community leader or someone people just tend to follow because of the way you carry yourself and the way you interact with your community. So important to get those civic leaders engaged. Our first responders are obviously part of with our fire departments. And then we've really worked hard to create public and private partnerships, because we know that it's not just going to be government to be able to get all of this work done. Some of it is employing private crews that are private independent contractors to get the work done. Another partnership is we were able to create a defensible space inspection application from a local Marin business. And now, so that provided some revenue for a business in Marin. They were able to launch and actually start selling that product elsewhere. So we're bringing revenue in Marin through that partnership. Our goal areas, the one that we're hitting on tonight, is that highlighted one, and that's to reduce wildfire fuels. But I like to attack this slide from the middle, and because that's our strategy. And actually the first person I heard it from was Chief Tyler, and our strategy is a house out approach. We have 110 years of deferred maintenance, right? Because of suppressing wildfire, people moving further and further into the wildlands. If it took 110 years to create the wildfire environment that we're in now, it's going to take a long time to get back to where we can have a healthy fire regime in Marin. So we felt like we really needed to focus where the lives and infrastructure are. And that's the house out approach. So to help reduce risk at homes, we're providing an inspection program. $4 million a year of our budget goes towards supporting our member agencies to provide defensible space evaluations. Last 2 years, we've inspected just over 33,000 structures within the MWPA jurisdiction. Novato Fire has a comprehensive program, and if you have any questions, Lynn and John Dickashay in the back can definitely help you get set up for that. So we're looking at home hardening and defensible space. Then the next tile over is to improve evacuation systems. So we have been working hard to make our evacuation routes safer, because we all know that during an evacuation, traffic jams are inevitable. None of our communities were designed for everybody to get on the road at once and leave at the same time. There are going to be traffic jams, no matter what we do to help that flow. So what we want is for those roads to be safe, even under fire conditions, if you're staying in your car in a traffic jam and not moving. So that's some of the work that we've been doing. But we've also been improving our ability to notify you of evacuations and give you information for those evacuations. And then we have the reduced wildfires, wildfire fuels. Greater Ross Valley, Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break is a perfect example of that. But even before the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break started, Novato Fire has been leading in charge in so many vegetation management projects within your community. And in fact, we're just going to be actually starting from some of the work they've already done with the Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break. Going next spot over is it's education. It is so important that we provide proper education to residents, because if we provide the proper education, people can make the right decisions. And so we fund our public education almost to $1 million a year to get the word out so that we can provide you the information so you can make informed decisions. And then we have grant programs to help people get their home hardening defensible space completed and low incomes senior tax exemptions. And I'm about to hand it over to Mike. We know that wildfire ignores jurisdictional boundaries, right? So the Marin Fire Services have historically done a great job of responding to fires regardless of jurisdiction. However, because of codes and ordinances and the way municipal laws work, we weren't always great at wildfire prevention across jurisdictional boundaries. And so that's one of the reasons why the MWPA was formed. And then we were able to break our 17 member agencies down into 5 different zones. And these zones actually make sense because the fuel types, the terrain, the road networks, the buildings types of Novato are much different than what we have in Southern Marin, right? And so one size doesn't fit all. So this allows us to tailor our projects to the zone that we're in and actually meet that community's needs instead of just bringing in the same solution for every zone. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Mike.
Thanks, Mark. I got to follow those two guys. How's my frame here? Am I okay? Hi to everybody. Thanks for coming out. Great turnout. And hello, everybody on Zoom. Just do a little commercial about Novato Fire District. We were formed in 1926, and we cover about 73 square miles, about a population of 65,000 people. And it's more than the city of Novato. It's the city of Novato plus all of the unincorporated areas. We go from just west of Stafford Lake all the way to the bay, from Big Rock Ridge north to the county line. So that's our zone. And our job's a lot simpler because we're a single agency within that zone. That's a little bit different from some of the other zones. For instance, Central Marin's full of many fire districts and departments and towns, and they have a more complicated way of managing the MWPA efforts, but they did start this Ross Valley project, which is the template that we're following, and it's been a good process. So we're going to talk, I'm going to give you the overview of the Novato Shaded Fuel Break project. Really, it's to build this continuous band around the entire community, and it's to reduce fuels, but also create a healthier environment. So I think we hit the note on what shaded fuel breaks are for. They're to create essentially a safer place for firefighters to defend your house or your community. So we'll get into the detail of that. But so we embarked on this project to put together a plan. And it's really in this zone where we're doing work, we're really trying to restore those conditions that existed across Marin when we had more frequent fire on the landscape, before we got really good at putting fires out. That where it was, larger, more open condition. And when fires passed through, they did less damage. They were less intense. So we're doing that by reducing the down and the dead. We're limbing trees up from below to reduce the ladder fuels. We're removing a lot of non-native species that have invaded our wild areas, especially in the disturbed areas right around where we live. So this creates this continuous strategic fuel break. An objective of the plan effort was to use modeling to really give us a blueprint. And it's really the blueprint because we are going to have this funding at least for 6 or 7 more years. And we hope at the end of that cycle, the tax gets renewed, because we want these fuel breaks to be permanent infrastructure, that we build it, we maintain it. It keeps the fire behavior where we want it to be, but also we're maintaining the natural environment. We're coming back, make sure these areas are weed free, that the biodiversity is intact. So that's a big thing. So we have this blueprint that gives us an idea of how much work, what the costs are, and it also, using the modeling, it helps us prioritize where the work should go. And finally, we wanted to have environmental compliance done so that we can move forward. And Mark talked about how swiftly we were able to do that by using the compliance pathway that you'll hear about in a little bit. So we achieved all of that. On the map here, there's a lot of information to take in. You can see the red ribbon, that's the fuel break plan. And you also can see, not so much, you can see all the land managers, our partners. So all of the yellow areas are county open space lands. The areas in the interior of Novato are city-owned, City of Novato-owned open space, where we've begun early projects. There were early MWPA funded projects, which helped us, figure out what's the best move with this larger project. So the work can happen on both public and private land, because the idea is that if we do work on your property, it's going to benefit the larger area in that zone. So as you hear a lot, fire doesn't understand property boundaries. So we have this fuel break. It's about 60 miles long. And here's a more focused picture of it. We have the 300-foot buffer, the red ribbon around the landscape. And then we have these yellow areas, which, using the planning nomenclature that we're using, it's called the wildland urban interface areas, where we're doing more extensive work beyond the 300 feet, or where we have ownerships where there's a single home in a large parcel, 5 to 15 acres, or in Greenpoint, where we have all the homes are on the ridgetop and all the wild areas are down in the valley bottom. So those ridgetop homes are complicated. There's no public land there. So it's a little bit trickier to decide how to lay out the fuel reduction effort. So we've kind of put that all in one pot, and we'll figure that out soon. You can see that the fuel break, it covers over 2,000 acres, and the WUI area almost 1,400 acres. So it's about 3,500 acres. We're probably not going to reach out to the full 300-foot width, but we have the option. The environmental compliance covered all of those areas. Most of the work is manual hand thinning. So crews on the ground using power tools, sometimes hand tools. There's some areas where we're going to be doing prescribed burning. There's currently we're doing grazing, what we refer to as prescribed herbivory in Marin Valley. So that could be expanded in the future. some areas may not be treated because the ground's too sloped. And I have some good news that some of the work's already happening. County Open Space says, for instance, from Burdell, graze a large area, thereby reducing that risk. And so that part of the fuel break is currently already being done. What else I want to say about that? Oh, let me just show you that kind of the blow up in the lower left corner, my lower left, is this WUI area, but inside of that WUI area, we've identified units where we can do prescribed burning. And prescribed burning is a difficult thing to do. So there's a lot of mechanical work that has to happen on the ground, fuel reduction before we're able to do broadcast burning. And Emily's going to walk you through a little bit of the environmental requirements.
Is that good? Okay. So I think what everybody had talked about a little bit is the environmental compliance that's required for this project. We did do what's called a project-specific analysis, and it's a CEQA system that's done under a programmatic environmental impact report that was done by CAL FIRE. And the programmatic report looked at the whole state of California. And what it allows you to do is to then take your project and do this project-specific analysis that then will say, do all the impacts that my project have fall within this broader EIR? And if so, can I commit to the mitigation measures or the standard project requirements in a way that allows me to use that CEQA document so that we don't have to redo a CEQA document for this specific project. It was done for the Greater Ross Valley project successfully. We took what we learned from that one and did it for the Greater Novato project as well. It's a really robust CEQA document, even though it is not, if anybody is used to the California Environmental Quality Act or CEQA, you'll be used to kind of like the EIR or a mitigated negative declaration. This looks a little bit different, but it's a really robust document that focuses on this project. And one of the great things about it is that it's built so that it can last for many years. So it's not just your CEQA compliance for this year, it's your CEQA compliance for several years into the future, because as we know, it'll take a while to get through this whole, the 60 miles and make sure that we're getting through not just the first pass of vegetation management, but any additional passes, because you're going to have to go back to certain areas and continue to do some of this vegetation management. So that's a really great tool that we can use through the project-specific analysis. The project-specific analysis was approved at the April 20th, 2023 MWPA board. It's been available for a while on the MWPA website. So it's a dense document, but I really want to encourage everyone, if you're interested, to go look at it. A lot of the maps that you've seen here or that are around the room, they're in that document, and it's got just a lot of information about the community of Novato. If you're interested in the vegetation in Novato, if you're interested in the land ownership, there's a lot of maps in there that are just really interesting. So I'm putting in a plug for it. And then, as I mentioned, the document, because we're using the PSA, we needed to review all of the mitigation measures and the standard project requirements from the CalVTP and determine which ones were appropriate for this project. And then those have to be included in the implementation process. So that means botanical surveys. It means making sure that if there are any sensitive cultural resources that they're taken into consideration. There's a slew of them that I'll get into a little bit. But just the last thing I wanted to mention is that in addition to the CalVTP measures, MWPA has its own measures that it requires to take into consideration before you go out and do a project if it's being funded by MWPA funds. So those were looked at as well. And then this is just a brief kind of like list of some of the environmental actions that we've taken so far. For the PSA, we did a biological desktop review of what is in the area of the fuel break and the WUI. We also did a number of what are called reconnaissance surveys, which means you don't go out and look at every piece of the ground that's being worked on, but you are going out to make sure that the information you're getting from your desktop review is appropriate, and you're taking note of any of those biological resources that are on the ground. In order to then do the work, we've started doing botanical surveys, which means we're going out, seeing if there's any sensitive plants on the ground, and if so, taking note of them, and then designing the implementation of the field break, taking that into consideration. We've done one round of botanical surveys thus far, and there's another one coming up soon. We also did, for cultural resources, there was another desktop review and also a record search, which is required, so that we can understand kind of, are there any sensitive cultural resources in the greater area? And then based on that, you do an analysis for whether or not you think you're going to find something in certain areas of known cultural resources or of high sensitivity. And then you get together with the implementation folks and ask, what are you planning on doing? Would it potentially impact this cultural resource? And based on that, you have to do surveys or you don't. All of those are requirements in the Cal VTP EIR. So it's one of those things that when you decide to use this tool, you sign up for it. But then once you've done it, it can be good for several years and you know what's in your area. The last thing I'll mention is that there was also a lot of slope and soils review so that we understand what are the soils in the field break and the WUI. And then the slopes are really important, especially in a year like this one where there was just so much rain. You really want to have a solid understanding of what are the slopes that you're working in. There are some limitations. So if the slope is too steep, you can't do all of the different types of vegetation management, and you have to select certain ones that are appropriate for that slope. So there is, if you're interested in the slopes in Novato, there are maps of those as well that really get into details of so that you can understand kind of what is happening in different areas. And all of those were sort of part of what we've done to date in order to get ready to get out into the field. Now I get to hand it back over to you.
Okay, so this map shows phase one, where, thank you, where we plan to do work in the first year or two. And this was determined based primarily on some modeling that was done during the planning process that looked at some worst case weather scenarios. We know all about the red flag warnings we get in the fall with the winds from the northeast and the low humidities. We also looked at fire spread under the kind of westerlies that we get frequently through the summer that come down the valley, pretty stiff breeze. It turns out that latter weather event causes more risk, and particularly in the areas on the west end of town where there's grasslands. So, and that lines up with our experience here where we've lost homes from those kinds of fires. The chief talked about that. Novato fires are typically the shorter duration, but can have a pretty heavy impact. So this has helped us determine where we would do the first work. And as I mentioned, some of the highest priority areas, well, the other part of that prioritization was where, if you implement the fuel reduction, are you going to have the greatest impact? So grasslands, greatest risk. You mow the grass, you have the greatest benefit. Really turns things around. So, and the good news is we had the slopes of Burdell as a really serious priority, a high risk, but the grazing and then the work between where the grazing happens in the backyards, the mowing that county open space does, mitigates that. And then we've done field reviews. Sarah and I have been walking these priority areas. County Parks is going to take on Little Mountain, and we walked the Verissimo Hills, another high priority. And there's been great fuel break work done there in the woodlands, and a lot of the folks there already do mowing. So again, we're checking it off before we even hit the ground. But we have some extremely steep ground. We've got some heavy fuels, mostly along that southern edge of town, and that's where we're going to be doing a lot of our work. As I said earlier, most of the work is being conducted by hand crews. And with all that material we cut, we have to find a way to dispose of it. So we have limited options. We can pile it and burn it. If we don't have a place to drag it to, that may be an option. Preferably, we can pull it to a roadhead and chip it back on site. If we can't chip it back on site, we have to find a place to dispose of it elsewhere. So that's the most of the work. That's where the cost really goes high. In Ross Valley, some of their experiences are having to pull broom, for instance, which is oftentimes the biggest amount of fuel that we're removing. The cost per acre are $10,000 to $15,000. So really expensive. As I mentioned, we are looking at using grazing. We're currently not using herbicides on broom, but we're using herbicides where we're taking out eucalyptus, acacia, other woody tree species that are sprouters. And I mentioned we have, it's kind of obscured here, one area where we're going to do broadcast burning. Pile burning is determined to be a form of prescribed burning, but where you treat the fuels broadly by igniting the entire area, that's what we call broadcast burning. And most of our focus is on the, breaking up the fuel continuity, more space between plants, more space between the ground and the canopy of trees, a lot of invasive species removal. It's not just broom, but broom is the demon. And again, we're trying to create this structure, this habitat, one that we think existed. We're not going back in time, but there was something to learn from how things were before. And we are removing some native trees where there's thickets of young oak saplings. We want to thin those out so we get to that place where we have wider space trees that are large and can stand up in the face of fire. Our little band there kind of obscures that, but the before and after, I don't know if we can move that, but here's another example of some work that we've done on another project on Redwood Boulevard going over the hill from South Novato, where again, you can see the crew at work removing this over their head, broom so thick they couldn't see their hand while standing in it. They extended it. So horrendous fuel bed, and then we also limb up from below. So as others have mentioned, this is really a collaboration. This is work that we all have a piece of, and we need partnership, not just between land management agencies. We actually trying to remove this fuel. We are going to be looking at opportunities where we can get access for crews from your property or bring material down to dispose of it. But we're not doing work in the landscaped areas. We're saying, so the buffer starts at your house, goes out 300 feet, but we're not going to come into your yard. That's kind of your responsibility. And we have a program to help you with that. We have a whole team of wildfire mitigation specialists. I left the card of the supervisor of that crew back there. I bet most of you have your Novato residents. You've probably taken advantage of that, but if you haven't, please grab Yvette Blunt's card. We have a crew that'll come out and do a home evaluation. They'll walk around your house, help you figure out what's needed to make your house more hardened, less ignitable, and what you can do in your landscape. So with that checklist, that gives you access to our really generous grant program. So help you get that work done and reduce the cost. So encourage that. So handing off back to Emily.
Okay, so we just wanted to do a little bit more, provide a little more information on some of the resource considerations that we have to think about when we're getting out and doing the work. As I mentioned, there's a lot of project-specific requirements, mitigation measures that we follow. I already mentioned botanical surveys, so I won't mention that again, except that they're still ongoing. If you do any of the work during nesting bird season, you're required to get out and do nesting birds. There's also certain areas where we're required to do surveys for bats or for other sensitive species that might be in that area. So wildlife is taken into consideration as well. I already spoke about cultural sensitivity and making sure that we know what's on the ground and that we're taking into consideration when we're planning any of the work that's being done. There's a lot of sensitive habitats in Novato and all of Marin really. And so taking those into consideration, if there's any riparian habitat, if there's oak woodlands, making sure that any of the work is appropriate for those sensitive habitats. Similarly, if there were streams in different areas, you're not allowed to always do work in streams, so sometimes they'll be avoided. We might be able to take advantage of some of the permits that have already got, that the city of Novato or other partner agencies have already gotten for some of that work in the more sensitive habitat. So we can really like build from the permits that they already have and make sure that we're complying with them, but that we can get that work done. We already talked about erosion potential. If there are steep slopes, you have to take into consideration if there's going to be erosion. For example, if there were going to be a rain event, there's certain activities that you have to do to make sure that your soil isn't being washed away. So there's just a slew of activities that will be happening at the same time or before implementation starts. And then the one other thing we wanted to really just sort of hit on is that there's a lot of training that goes into the crews that are going to get out there and do the work. So there will be tailboard trainings that have to happen before they start doing the work. So they have a sense of like, what are the sensitive resources that they should be on the lookout for. There'll be specialized implementation professionals who are going to be part of Novato Fire or other places that will also get training. They'll have a better sense of like, what really are all these requirements in the PSA. And they'll really help direct the crews and sort of, you know, map out what's going to happen in these different areas that we're working, because every area is different and needs to have those considerations of on the ground thought. And then the other thing that's required as part of the PSA is really documenting it. I mean, MWPA does a great job regardless of just trying to really document what they're doing, make sure that folks are aware of it. But it is a requirement for the PSA that they do an annual report. So at the end of the year, they will have GIS of every place where they work so that can be provided to CAL FIRE. And then also they'll have a report of the type of work that they did and the type of measures that they did to make sure that resources were taken into consideration. So all of that will be happening at the same time as the project is ongoing, and they'll do this every year. So every year you'll be able to see where was work conducted, and you can see sort of the growth as it goes around the shaded field break, which is exciting. That is our last slide. So really what we wanted to do now, we have a lot of time. We wanted to open it up to any questions that you guys have. We also have people on Zoom. So we'll probably, I think maybe take turns. If there's a question in the room, we'll take it and then maybe move to any questions on Zoom. Oh, please.
How do you plan to schedule with homeowners?
So the question is, how do you plan to schedule the work with the homeowners? I'm going to pass it over.
So if you live in the phase 1 priority area, we sent out 800 postcards to anybody living adjacent to that. And we are requesting that you sign a right of entry agreement. First, that allows our biological professionals to go and do the survey work that needs to happen in advance. And that then when work is ready to be done, that we have permission to do that. And so that gives us the connection with you, your email, your phone number, and, you know, so we've gotten a pretty good response of that 800. I don't know if we're up to like 200 or 300. 300, which is, I'm pretty happy about that. So we're still working on the schedule, but we're probably we're going to work more than one site at a time, but we're going to move from the west to the east, but there'll be other sites that will be working, little islands and pockets of work simultaneously. So we will be determining that in the next couple of weeks. But there's some of this is unknown in terms of how fast we can move. So it's pretty contingent, but we'll be reaching out to neighborhoods based on the contact information that we've developed and giving people a heads up. And in many cases, people have asked to come for us to come visit them and tell us what they're going to do. And 8 out of 10 of those folks, they've already managed their property well. So they just want to make sure we're not going to mess it up. Yeah, so I think we'll be able to be more than 2 weeks ahead of it. Yeah. We won't start work until August 1. August 1 is when we've finished bird nesting season. So we're clear of that. So that just makes our job a little bit easier. So yeah, we're in the process, but we hope to give you plenty of heads up. And if you want to have a visit from us, we'd be happy to do that. I think we're going to get a question from the Zoomers.
Our first question online is, in Pacheco Valle, many of us back onto Marin open space. A number of years ago, Marin open space was against changing any natural changes in the landscape. No taking down of dead trees or removing downed dead limbs or trees, etc. At the time, we were told that whatever occurred naturally should be left as is. This was before the devastating fires in Sonoma. Has Marin Open Space changed its policy so that the WUI area behind the proposed fire break around Pacheco Valle and other similar areas can be made safer?
Chip, come on up. We have Superintendent Jim Jacob from County Parks here to address that question.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks. Well, I've been with the department for about 6 years, and I'm not sure when this experience was with this person, but in general, over the last 6 years and more, we don't have a hard policy about what we do, but we do have a series of best practices that we try to partner with our fire partners to develop multiple benefit projects. And what's meant by that is taking an approach that improves the safety of our neighbors and also improves the ecological conditions of the preserve. So, from a specific standpoint in terms of distance from homes, all the things we're talking about with defensible space today, our approach is to remove dead and down material within the first 100 feet of a home. And, of course, open space preserves it provides habitat for our resident wildlife. And so the further you go away from home, we do occasionally, we will leave dead material for the habitat value in the maybe 200 or 300 feet zone beyond the structure. But no, our approach right now is to really focus on dead and down material. I can speak specifically to Pacheco Valle in the last few years, and both in 2020 and in 2021, we partnered with the Marin County Fire Department's TAM crew. The TAM crew is a team of vegetation removal specialists. And so they worked in the area of James Black Circle and Eagle Gap Lane. I think there was a couple other locations too where, dead and down material within 100 and even 200 feet were removed. When I say policy, that we don't have a hard and fast policy, we do have a series of variables that we consider. So things like slope and other site conditions may encourage us to move or remove more vegetation further from 100 feet, maybe up to 200 feet. It depends on if there's other invasive species, what are the other vegetation conditions. So we try to take a flexible approach, but in the end, we want to create a multiple benefit project that, certainly protects our neighbors. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Are there any other questions in the room? Please.
Who's responsible for any liability that could occur from a landslide or something legal happening? Is that fire district, or is that being in the fire district, or is that in county?
So the question was, who was liable for any sort of damage that might happen during the work, either from landslides or any other of the work happening? I'm going to hand that over.
We can cope.
This may require more than one person to answer, but one of the firms that we work with is a geology firm. And we have them take a look at our project area and assess slope stability issues, erosion potential, and provide recommendations so that what we're doing is informed by professionals. So there may be areas that don't get treated because of issues like slope instability. There may be areas where instead of pulling broom, we cut and paint the stumps so that we're leaving the roots in place. And there may be areas where there are past landslides mapped, painstakingly hand digitized by these professionals, where we avoid. And there may be areas that are just fine as long as you're very careful and you time it well in terms of the seasonality. So you could remove vegetation earlier in the season so that later on there's time for other things to grow in its place to hold soil together. You know, with that being said, the hillsides did not evolve geologically with broom here. So the hillsides, from what we have been learning from our geologists, the hillsides are not depending on broom to be there to hold them together. Marin has a history of landslides and slope instability, and so that's something we watched very carefully. You know, over this last winter, it really tested our project areas. We had a lot of treated areas that, you know, saw many, many, many inches of rain this winter and held together. And so we're feeling really good about it. With that said, we have a professional helping us with our projects to make sure that whatever we do is informed by all of that great advice. Anything else to add?
But to get straight to your point about who's liable for it. So the MWPA is the primary funding source for this project. So of course, people are going to point at the MWPA, and that's fine. But it all matters on how the lawsuit would be configured. And if it does get to court, well, then most likely they're going to haul us all into court, and the liability will be addressed in that way. I do know that the MWPA wants to be a good partner and good neighbor to all the residents. So our goal is that if there are any issues that we cause from our work, we hope to mitigate this, bring a solution rather than have it go to court.
A question from online. Are pesticides being used in any of this work?
Currently, we've used only an herbicide on a eucalyptus tree removal over by Marin Valley Cemetery. Did I get that right? There's so many valleys in Marin's. And anyway, so we removed about 1.5 acres of eucalyptus, and pretty large, about 1,000 stems on 1.5 acres. This is an area that was adjacent to a stream, and we needed to get a Department of Fish and Wildlife stream alteration bed permit, and all of the activities were governed by that permit, and we had to use a formulation of herbicide that was the least toxic for an aquatic environment. The herbicide was applied directly to the stump soon after it was cut. And so far that's been successful. So we're using the least amount of herbicide as possible. And that's the only place where we're currently considering using an herbicide.
Are there other questions in the room?
Sure. Question. I see a picture up there. You've got a bunch of goats.
Yeah.
To what extent are you anticipating using goats to clear grassy areas? For example, Mount Verdell behind San Marin, there's a lot of grass area there. I've seen fires start there, and they go pretty quickly if you've got a pretty good wind there. Mm-hmm. I've seen experience with this when I worked with PG&E and our driver King. His department, we had goats come in every year in spring, late spring, and they would clear the entire hill probably within a week.
Mike, I don't know if you can speak to that one. I will say the PSA considered the potential for herbivory in anywhere within the field break, but then where they will actually be used will be dependent on more information.
So as I said, we currently have one project where we use goats, and we're really focusing on our effort in that first couple 100 feet. You can cover the whole hillside, but the risk is near the home. So wanting our dollars to be spent wisely, we're not doing wide areas. And And goats also are not as discriminating as humans. So we use a lot of hand crews with weed whips, and they're about comparable in cost. But they, for instance, goats love madrones and manzanita. There's a beautiful common manzanita that's in Novato, these big, gigantic things that don't sprout. So when the goats girdle them, they kill them. So those are desirable plants. So goats aren't always appropriate in all vegetation types, but we are considering, especially after we've kind of done that initial pass, got rid of the broom, and it's more of an open condition. So that'll be increasing use. But really, our focus for the fuel break is that first couple 100 feet. Getting a workout up here.
Another question from online. Is there a sequence timeline so that various neighborhoods can get an idea about when the buffer zone work will begin in our respective areas?
I think we heard this question before. So we're working on that right now, scheduling of where we're going to do work. And so we're collecting right of entry agreements and contact information. So we intend to do this community at a time. We'll and as I said, we're intend to meet with homeowners that want to know specifically what we're going to do on their property. We don't have a schedule yet, but we will endeavor to get that out within the next month or so. We have to do that scheduling for our own purposes, excuse me, so we can get these pre-project evaluations due. We haven't talked about it a lot, but one of the other things besides looking for rare plants is we have to have a cultural resource specialist come and look for Native American sites or signs of that. So that's a piece that we need to get done as well. So we don't have the schedule yet, but we'll be getting it out. And we'll, as I said, we have contact info, so we could do that in a kind of a stage manner. And if we get further along, we could probably publish where we think we'll go. Again, I'm going to caution that this is a new endeavor. We're doing work on lands that we haven't before, so we might be delayed in some cases. So it's going to be a flexible schedule. I'll put it that way.
Please.
Yes, just more broadly, have you scoped out even broadly phase 2, phase 3, et cetera, over the next 4 or 5 years, or is that too far in the future?
So the question for the folks on the Zoom is, have we looked out for future phases 2, 3, 4? We hope to implement the whole project over about 5 years, and that partly that's contingent on funding. We've got one, in addition to the MWPA monies that we're investing. We've got a Conservation Corps. North Bay has secured a grant to support work in Novato, and we've also got a CAL FIRE grant that we're hoping to hear about soon. So that's part of the story in the future years. To answer your question directly, no, we haven't thought that far out, but we kind of have a general plan. But we're first busy trying to get phase 1 figured out and scheduled.
The only other item that I'm going to add is that the phases are there's a Google map and just a regular map, if you like, a PDF on the MWPA website. So that will also be updated as they move out. So if anybody wants to be able to look at it, they can look at that that Google Earth KMZ file to see where phase 1 is and the overall shaded field break.
Where do you see that map?
On the MWPA website, which is
ringwildfire.org. And then on the top, you'll see projects. And if you go by zone, hit Novato, and then you'll see all of Novato's projects. Pick the greater Novato shaded fuel break, and the maps will be in there.
By street or pretty close, accurate like that?
It has a KMZ file, so then you could, if you use Google Earth, you can look at it, but it does also have map books where you can see kind of the different streets. It sort of zooms into the different areas.
And you can Google Greater Novato Shaded Fuel Break if you don't want to just navigate through the website to find it. Also, all of the materials, the handouts from tonight, project maps, and the slides and recording of this presentation will be available there from now on. So if you have friends who missed it tonight, they can watch the presentation all over again.
Sure.
So I got a couple of questions about the fuel break. Further to this question about implementation. So it's a very cool map, and phase one implementation looks pretty ambitious. What's the time frame for completion of phase one?
The question was, what's the time frame for implementation of phase one?
We hope to get it done this year and next year.
End of 2024.
2024.
Phase one will be finished.
Don't quote me though.
Well, that's like June 30. So this will be 2024, but it'll end June 30.
Yeah, and most of our work's gonna, because we want to avoid nesting bird season, so we wait till August 1st when we're past that period. Because when we do find nesting birds, we have to flag a buffer zone around them and avoid work until the birds fledged. And if we, like, this is a really rich year for bird nesting, and we'd have little buffers all over the place. So that's not really feasible for us. So we're waiting till August, and then bird nesting season begins February 1. So that's our kind of our window for woody work, you know, where we're doing saw work. We can't pull broom and not impact bird nesting, at least according to our environmental compliance. But so there's a seasonality to the work.
I heard clearly that you guys are up.
That's about right. That's fair. Yeah. I'll tell you practically for other projects, we're working in Novato open space, where the buffer is from their fence. That's how the project's described, not from their house. We're doing 30 to 50 feet, depending on whether they're upslope or downslope and what their yard looks like, you know. So we try to size it to what makes sense and what's effective.
A question from online: will all trees be limbed 6 feet up from the ground, which is the standard in other counties? If not, what is the standard for limbing trees?
The guideline that we're using is 6 to 8 feet, sometimes 10 feet, but you know, depending, but no more than 1/3 of the tree height. That was an easy one.
Goats can be vectors for invasive plants. If you have goats chewing through a stand of mature broom that's in seed, and then you move those goats to another place, their droppings are going to be full of roots. So you have to do something to prevent that. Either got to kind of take them someplace where they can be quarantined for a day or two, clean them out, and then you move them. And that often doesn't happen. And I wonder if you have that in your mitigation measure.
Yeah, it's something that I'm not aware of. But I have to say most of the work that we're doing is in grasslands and not where we remove the broom in advance. But the broom seed is it's long lasting, and really the game is to exhaust the seed bank over time. So that means continuous effort. So it's years.
Yeah. I would just add that, you know, goats are actually rather unique in terms of grazing animals, and they do a much better job of digesting seeds to the point where they're no longer viable than some of the other grazers out there. So they actually do a pretty good job. And if you're trying to avoid spreading non-native plant seeds, and I know Open Space has been looking into that very question and has some data that I don't know if there's anything reportable now, but I know you guys have been looking into it as well.
Yeah, nothing I can speak
to. Okay. Yeah, but yes, we are very aware of that and have made sure we've talked to a lot of experts, and we feel pretty confident that grazing with goats would not actually exacerbate that issue.
Couple questions from online. Who will be overseeing the crews? Are they all city employees?
So the staff overseeing the work are people with a natural resource background, like myself. I have Sarah Laberton in the back, who we have an announcement to make pretty soon. Sarah's a wildlife biologist and a competent botanist, and has done a lot of vegetation management work, habitat restoration, and then we're hiring a second vegetation management specialist, a young person with a degree in forestry and a similar background in vegetation management. So we have two really competent people. All of us are employees of Novato Fire, not the city of Novato. We may employ, MWPA has vegetation management staff. We may, if things get really busy, we may employ them as well. All of the work is kind of overseen by the Panorama, our environmental consultant, and we have lots of biologists out giving us information about, especially when working during bird nesting season, about habitat issues and that sort of thing. So I think we're pretty well informed in that regard.
Will there be any clear cutting?
We're not removing any mature native trees. I don't see any other big patches of trees, but we will be going after non-native pines, eucalyptus, acacia, those, because those are flammable species, but also because they're can be somewhat invasive, and we want to promote our native woodland species. So especially in the kind of interior open space areas in Novato, you've got these beautiful oak woodlands, and at one point somebody planted a ton of Monterey pine and other pine species. So we're going to be removing those because they are reproducing in the oak woodlands, and over time they're going to reduce the quality of the habitat, but also increase the risk, the fire risk as well.
A question from online. What if a worker is injured on private property?
I guess that's a liability question. So all of the contractors are bonded and licensed, and they have to provide us with certificates of insurance. All workers are going to be protected under California workers' comp laws. If there's an emergency, they're going to call 911, and Novato Fire is going to come to help out in a hurry. I think that was a pretty easy one also. I don't know if you got a chance.
You spoke about the supervisors of these crews, but what about the actual crews? I think the reason I'm interested is because back in the 70s, the county sent in, they had youth workers, I forget what they called the program, and they handed them all axes and machetes and told them to clean up Arroyo of Vici Creek, which is where I live. And they did so much damage that the erosion, the creek bed dropped over a foot over the next couple of years, because they went and they cut back all the roots that were sticking out. It was just careless work. I hope I don't want to see that happen.
So we hire for the handwork. We hire landscape companies who have been doing the work for a while, and I can vouch for them. The supervisors are knowledgeable. We give them training in advance. All crews are.
It's going to take a lot of people to do this.
And we also use Conservation Corps North Bay, which have less experienced crew members, but all their supervisors are experienced. And we have daily contact with the crew. We're monitoring all of their work daily. So I think we're in good shape that way. You got to take turns here. You're giving me a work.
Another question from online. Are you going to have burn piles near homes? Will the cuttings be removed off-site?
Yes to both. Where we can, where we have access, we want to remove the vegetation. I think burn piles can be done safely and keep the smoke out of people's homes. So that's a tool where we don't have access to the vegetation, we have to dispose of it in some fashion. So that may be a tool that we use. Do you want to say?
Yeah,
more
I'll
about
just
that?
add that on the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break, our 38-mile long kind of little sister of this project, we had burn piles getting managed today, about 35 of them, and another 35 tomorrow, right near homes. Marin County Fire Department managed the burn, and we worked with Bay Area Air Quality Management District to address smoke concerns, and we had a very successful day burning piles very safely next to homes today, and another one coming tomorrow.
So the piles are burned under conditions where the smoke's going to go straight up and vent away from homes. So that's something that we're concerned about, and but also Air Quality Management District is giving us plenty of advice and have the last say over when a burn day can happen. So yeah, we're pretty careful about that, Paul.
Douglas fir is a native species, but it's often managed as an invader in oak woodlands. And is that something that the district would take care of when
yeah, you know, I haven't seen that. Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to repeat the question was that Douglas fir is a native California species, but is sometimes managed as an invasive in oak woodland. And so the question was about whether or not that was something being considered in this project.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think other land management agencies are doing that to protect oak woodlands where you have, you know, 200-year-old trees and Douglas fir that's coming up under the canopy and shading out the oaks, or they're there in large numbers as seedlings and producing that kind of ladder fuel effect. So yeah, we want to recreate what natural fire would have done, and that would have kept the Douglas fir at bay. So yeah, that's a treatment that we would consider as well.
Good question. Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned homeowners insurance. This is a very good program. Have you communicated all the details to the Commission of Insurance and thereby have this information fed to all the insurance companies that insure our homes?
The question was whether the information about this project had been shared with the Homeowners Insurance Commission so that they can have information about how this ties into homeowner insurance.
The short answer is yes. We are sharing a lot of the work that we're doing. There's tremendous interest, especially amongst the California, the CDI, California Department of Insurance. Thank you. About the MWPA and our community-wide approach. We're getting where they recognize our large-scale work, but on the smaller scale, we do have the Safer from Wildfire regulations that mandates that if people do a list of 1 to 12 items, then they can be eligible for insurance discounts. We're working on that. And then there's the Insurance Institute for Insurance Business and Home Safety. They have a wildfire prepared home designation. And then we're working at, we have partnered with IBHS that they can, with the residents' permission, the data from our reports can be transmitted to them so they can qualify for that report. For the Safer from Wildfire regulations, come December of this year, the rates and the discounts for each of the 12 items will be published. And our intent is to be able to, from our database, we'll know if your house qualifies for 3 out of the 12. We'll know that. We'll be able to send you a letter that says, hey, by the way, you are eligible for a discount because you have these, you met these 3 items of the 12 and you can get a discount. So yes, we are working on that.
The program don't apply to condominium. You know anything about that?
The question is whether or not to put those requirements apply to condominiums and homeowners associations. And actually, I would need to research that. I don't know off the top of my head. Maybe Chief Tyler does.
I think there's a gap in insurance coverage for that, and I think that's something that the insurance commissioner, is trying to address. And there's a very active group called United Policyholders that you can, they meet quarterly online. You can join this group and get kind of the most current information that's out there, but they're making progress. They are making progress. We are starting to hear back from homeowners saying that they are, where before they maybe had to pay triple the amount, some of the bids are now getting more reasonable bids, and in other areas where they weren't getting coverage at all, they're starting to get coverage. So we're starting to see a little bit of movement there. But the insurance agencies are becoming more and more engaged. And because I believe now with the most current rate that they've applied for in California, they have to have programs that provide, insurance where there are these fuel reduction carbon communities working hard.
We have a comment from online that says, please consider the value of all healthy trees. They sequester carbon amongst a ton of other important attributes. I will send information to MWPA. This person was looking at an MWPA plan and noticed that many of the models used are from 2012. There are new studies, according to this person, that show going too far is not helping. Doing too much in open spaces and forest areas is not helpful.
So I think we are definitely taking into consideration the health of trees and the importance overall of that. I don't think that is being ignored in any way in the PSA. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure which modeling tool they're talking about that used 2012 data. I can say that the data that was used in the models for both Greater Ross Valley and for this project was from 2020. It was the most recent LiDAR data that was available that we could use for modeling. But recognizing that 2020 is still 3 years ago, the team that we worked with reached out to Mike and to other resources to make sure that we were trying to incorporate anything that might have happened between 2020 and now to make sure that our models were taking it into consideration. And for example, we had several back and forths with Mike where he helped us see where fires had happened between 2020 and now so that we could include them into the model. So the model is aware of what is the most recent fuel that might be leading to wildfire. So we recognize that the data right now that we're using is 2020, and we're doing everything we can to try to update it as best as possible so that the model does have the most recent fuelscape that's available.
Yeah, and just to add to that, a few comments about carbon and carbon sequestration. And if you check some documents out there like the California Forest Carbon Plan, there's an acknowledgement that if you do a little thinning of stands that are overstocked, so for us, we're not really thinning stands of trees like you would in the Sierras, but say you're removing acacia and eucalyptus and you've got oak in the area, or you've got redwoods that are small and unhealthy. If you start removing some of those stems in an overcrowded stand, the remaining trees sequester far more carbon than they would otherwise. And so some of the examples in the state documents on this subject are really compelling in that arena. So we think there's actually a carbon benefit to leaving healthy trees that then grow exponentially larger and sequester more carbon. I would also add that there needs to be a consideration of avoided emissions. If you take a look at the Air Resources Board data on carbon emissions over the last several years, there's a significant uptick in carbon emissions from wildfires. So if we're reducing the chance that our carbon stocks here in Marin County are going to end up in smoke, then I think we're avoiding a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, I guess that's all I would say there, unless there's something anybody else wants to add. Thanks.
I have a question about mulch. Is that safe to put around your home, or is it
the question was about mulch and whether it was safe to put around your home or whether that was also a combustion risk.
That's a good question. And the answer is it depends on the mulch. Some mulch is fantastic. Some mulch is perfect for what we need to do. It retains the moisture, allows the vegetation to grow well. Then other mulch is going to make the problem worse. So Fire Safe Marin is a great resource. UC Cooperative and the Marin Master Gardeners has tons of information to point you towards the right mulch. And then we're also doing an additional study, and UC through UC Cooperative, and Stephen Quarles is helping to guide us, that we're going to be analyzing actually the flammability of different mulches, and we're going to be able to publish those results. But I will give you an anecdotal from my personal history, where I live in Santa Rosa, and the glass fire went through my neighborhood. And I see people who have had the gorilla hair, which is like, I look at that and cringe. That's absolutely one of the worst things you can have. I saw homes or fences burned because of what the gorilla hair did. They rebuilt the fence and then they piled gorilla hair right back up to it. So it's a great question, and we need, it's an obvious indicator that we need to increase the education on that.
I just had a comment on that. University of Nevada, Reno, and some other agencies got together, I think 2 years ago, and did a full comprehensive study that's readily accessible online. And it's like a 7-page document, and they burned and they did everything, and we'll give you some pretty good details.
And just for our online crowd, University of Nevada, Reno, did a research study on this. And probably if you Google UNR mulch study, you'll probably get that information.
We have a couple questions from online. Do you know of other shaded field break projects as large as this one? You are setting a precedent. What are advantages of large size?
In Marin, we're in the Bay Area. This is definitely the largest project. I know there have been other large projects, whether it compares in scale. I'm not 100% sure, but the large, let me speak to the large size of it. And that, for me, one of the most important aspects of it is we don't get to pick where fires occur. Number one, we do know where historically fires are likely to occur. But in my opinion, we focus on mega fires far too much. We need to focus on the fires that happen 95 to 99% of the time. And Chief Tyler put it very, very well. These fires that are occurring that last 20 minutes or so, they can get to a house faster than a fire engine can. So that's why we need to help defensible space through the entire shaded fuel break. I do like to bring up a couple of shaded fuel breaks that were, and there's more than this, that were extraordinarily successful. Shaver Lake in Fresno County during the Creek Fire. The Creek Fire wiped out just about every community it came across until it came to Shaver Lake that had a very successful shaded fuel break. And then the Caldor Fire, as it came down into the Tahoe Basin, and there was remarkable work in that area. 150-foot flame lengths to 15-foot flame lengths. So there is a lot of data to support the way that we're doing this work.
I have a question about a lot of this information is very, very useful. And we know there are critical areas where you're going to get fires perhaps, and they're going to be very devastating. How is this information feeding into the planning of new development in the county?
The question was that this information is very helpful, and how is it being used to being taken into consideration in the planning in the county for development?
Excellent question, because we all know the elephant in the room is that we have certain aspects of government saying we need to increase housing, and we have certain aspects of government saying we got to stop building in high fire severity areas. So Community Development Agency does network with the MWPA quite often. An example is our evacuation ingress egress risk assessment has benefits to the work that they're doing. So they were a partner in that project. They helped us build that project. So that's kind of in the description of that relationship. Plus, each of the fire districts and fire departments has a say in how development is being done. And then things like Senate Bill 99, Assembly Bill 747, and some other bills dictate where and how structures can be built and what density and evacuation routes. So yes, we are being advised.
And I just want to add to that, that in Marin County, if you're going to build into these wildland urban interface areas, if it's actually a buildable lot and you go through the process and are able to do that, there are more restrictive building requirements within this. So you're going to have to build a house that is ignition resistant. All of the architectural features have to be ignition resistant. You're going to be required to have a vegetation management plan that covers 100 feet around that home. You're going to have vehicle access with good widths, places for fire engines to turn around, and fire hydrants that work. And so those homes that maybe still be able to build into these infill areas will be much more fire resistant than anything that's there now.
Any additional questions?
So the cutting the grass and the pulling the broom, but not dealing with the seeds. It looks like you're going to have a problem every year. You cut the grass. Are you going to come back every year and cut it again, or?
So the question was, with broom in particular, where there's are problems with so many seeds, will you be dealing with the seeds? And if not, will there be follow-up because they might be sprouting on an annual basis?
Before MWPA, there's a lot of grass mowing in Novato. And I attribute this to the district's fire prevention work, the outreach that's happened over the years. So that's happening in a lot of areas, especially people that are adjacent to grasslands. We've made a commitment to some project areas that we're going to come mow grass every year. And where we're managing broom, we're going to monitor that. Eventually, we're going to get this whole thing into kind of a structured maintenance cycle. And so we'll look at each area and kind of judge what's needed there and figure out when we need to come back. So we're going to learn from what we do and kind of build a maintenance regime.
And I just want to add, we used the term infrastructure earlier. So this work is meant to be another sort of a passive thing that's there to help slow fire and change the fire behavior, to drop it down. And we need this to be maintained ongoing. And the only way that we're going to be able to do that is with public support. We want to do such a great job that when you are driving around, you notice that evacuation route clearances are much better. It's cleaner. When you look into the open space areas or the places that back up into these homes, you're going to see a more park-like look, and you're going to want that to be that way. Because if the measures aren't supported going forward after that 7 years, then the only way we can maintain it is through existing revenues, which is much more difficult to do. And also, we would have to be competing for grants to try and do it. And before long, you'd see stuff growing back up. So it's critical that we do our job well and that you all recognize the benefit and will support that going forward.
Is this a good time to put in a plug for Chipper Days?
Yeah. Where's the schedule, John?
All right, so I just have to tell you, I'm a newbie in Novato. I've only lived here 29 years. I'm just a newbie, but I moved to Indian Valley, and the Indian Valley Association had this Chipper Days where you could bring your brush to a location and it would get chipped as part of the association expenditures. And I thought it was brilliant. What a great public-private partnership. And then we had the COVID times. Of course, things got shut down, but post-COVID, Dan Russo, Bill Tyler have decided that Chipper Days is worth the investment of it. I think your budget, and I don't know if we get anybody from you too, but what a fantastic public-private partnership. I love bringing dozens of yards of brush down to the street. These guys come chip it and haul it away. It makes their job easier, makes my property safer and look prettier. What better deal is there in our government institutions today? And Dan Russo has told us that, and I'm putting a plug in for Checkle Avenue because we produce more brush than anybody else in Indian Valley, so we're feeling good about that. Brandon, my fire captain, is a great guy. But Dan Russo's like, anytime you want to haul brush, we'll come chip it. Just give me a call and make a date. And that is a brilliant program.
And so if I can reiterate for the members online, a great plug for Chipper Days. There's multiple ways to access it. Contact Novato Fire, go to the website, go to Chipper Days. But I also heard a challenge in there. He just put Pacheco up on top, and he's challenging anyone to do better than Pacheco.
My 100 yards of brush.
There you go. But there, we are consciously trying to create a return on investment for your tax dollars. On average, a home in Marin is paying $200 a year towards the MWPA tax. If you use Chipper Days once, that's $300 to $500 right there that you just saved yourselves. In other municipalities, they're charging the residents for defensible space evaluations. That's $150. A lot of them are charging that. And so by right there, you have an automatic return on your investment. That doesn't even include the increased safety that you should realize from all of this work. And then I did want to talk about the maintenance of our infrastructure that we're creating. We just finished the planning cycle for our 4th year. So obviously for the first couple of the years, new projects, maintaining old projects. And we know that that scale is going to start to tip. So this year, for the planning cycle, 22 new projects compared to 101 continuing projects. So you see that we're getting to that point where maintenance is coming up to be as important as the new projects. Years 5 to 7, you're going to see almost 100% of our work is towards maintenance, maybe a few emerging projects, and we'll go after grant monies for new projects because, quite frankly, the problem with grants is they're not sustainable. You get a grant, you get the work done, then like the chief said, it just grows back. So we've got a sustainable funding source to be able to keep that work going.
Thank you. Let me just, and if I can just say, and I'm glad to see that we've answered most of your questions, and we'll stick around too if you've felt too shy to raise your hand. But this project is just one of many things that we're doing here in Novato to try and become a fire adaptive community. And all of you have the opportunity to have these free assessments. We've done thousands already that then give access to homeowners for matching grant funds to either harden their homes or to remove vegetation or both from around their homes. Opportunities to meet your neighbors through the Chipper Days, opportunities to become a Firewise neighborhood and community. We are bringing in rangers, 1.5 FTEs to help us go in and identify where there may be homeless encampments in open areas and to remove the ignition sources from those areas and try and connect those people to services to get them out of that area. So that's a new thing that's going to be happening. The study of our evacuation routes and all the evacuation route clearing that we're doing will help us prioritize where additional work can be done, and also working with the city about if there are roadways that maybe we find a point of congestion that we can do some other infrastructure change so that more people, more folks can get out of that particular area. We're also beginning to do studies for long-range acoustical devices that may help basically an alarm in a neighborhood where those neighborhoods would want those to help alert them in case that there are wildfires coming. This is a big concern that many neighbors had because of the Tubbs fire. Their either phones didn't work or their cell phones went down, and we have another way to be able to try and communicate that out. So, we're looking to constantly partner with individuals and within their neighborhoods to see how we can kind of maximize efforts all the way around. And, we're happy to come to your neighborhood. If you have a group that you'd like us to come and speak, we're happy to do that anytime that's convenient for you and talk about how we can bring these resources to you.
I think that might be all of our questions. We do have about 10 more minutes of the event. So if anybody wants to ask us questions, I'm going to put in another plug for our map that I think is really neat and shows Novato kind of as a whole with the fuel break. It's our gift to Mike. So he gets to have it in the fire district. So if anybody's interested, they can they can also go there and see it. But I really wanted to just say thank you to everyone online and to everyone here. You know, it's great to have everybody here and asking questions and interested.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.